right, we are going to be in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 tonight. So you can open up to 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. And again, it's good to see all of you. We are continuing our study, our series, through the, Thessalonians, the first letter to the Thessalonians. And we've come to chapter 2 now. We covered an entire chapter last time. And 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. And we will see two main divisions, the first of which is conduct of the missionaries, and that will take us from verses 1 to 12. Now, I do not know how far we will get into these verses. I can tell you we definitely will not get past verse 12, that's for sure. We may get down to verse 12 today. But this is actually very, very fitting because there are some of us who are leaving on Saturday for the Mile High mission trip. And what we're getting in these verses is, obviously, as I just mentioned, the first 12 verses, we're seeing conduct of the missionaries. Now, the missionaries that we're discussing here are Paul and his traveling companions, which we've read about before. But as you and I, some of us, head up to Mile High Pines for this Mile High mission, it's fitting that we would look at these verses as we prepare to go up. And it may be that some of you go, you know what, I'm not a missionary and I'm not a pastor like Paul, and I'm not doing that, I'm not preaching, so this really doesn't apply to me. But however, I would say this, that whatever our spiritual leaders are doing is what all of us should be doing. Even if we're not leaders, if we're not in leadership, whatever it is that they're doing, whichever direction they're leading us in, is the direction that we should be going in. So as we're looking at Paul and Silas and Timothy, and they were missionaries at the time, and Luke was with them traveling some. As we're watching them and looking at them and seeing their example and their conduct, we should be seeking to emulate that, to copy that, to do the same things that they do. It's the same thing that we do with Jesus, right? We're not the Messiah, that's for sure. We're not the Son of God, but we study what he's done, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then we do our best to follow in his footsteps and love the way that he loved and live the way that he lived and minister the way that he ministered to. So it's the same thing. So all of us are included in this. So we are looking at the conduct of the missionaries, and this is a personal letter, although it's a letter to the church. Paul was personally intimately involved with the Thessalonians because he had been there. We read about that last time, and we'll read a little bit more from Acts tonight. But let's jump in at verse 1. For you yourselves know. Now that's a common phrase throughout the book, throughout the letter to the Thessalonians. Paul, again, had been with them. They knew Paul. So when he says, you yourselves know, it means that they knew through experience. They knew Paul. They knew him personally. So they knew what he had experienced. So he's reminding them of something. For you yourselves know, brethren. So he's talking to the brothers. And I would even say that he's talking to the sisters there, the people in the church. That our coming to you was not in vain. It wasn't empty. So when Paul and his companions came to Thessalonica, it was an empty ministry. It wasn't fruitless. It was fruitful. Now let's read about that. In verse 2, beginning in verse 2, and that is going to take us to verse 6, we are going to look at their conduct in their preaching, first of all. Now later on, and again we might get to it, we'll see what happens tonight. We'll get to their practice, but for now, we're focused on their preaching. What was their conduct like in their preaching? It says in verse 2, but even after we had suffered before and were spitefully treated at Philippi. Okay, so when they went to visit the Philippians, they went to Philippi before they went to Thessalonica. And there was drama in Philippi. There was action in Philippi. We'll read about it in just a moment here, but let me finish reading verse 2. Even after we had suffered before and were spitefully treated at Philippi, as you know, there's the phrase again, you Thessalonians know, you're well acquainted with this, we were bold in our God to speak to you the gospel of God in much conflict. Now, there's a lot going on there that I need to explain, but let's talk about, first of all, at the beginning of verse 2, but even after we had suffered before and were spitefully treated at Philippi, what he's reminding, because they already know, he's reminding the Thessalonians that when we came to you, we had already suffered over in Philippi. For doing what? For preaching the gospel. So what did we do when we got to Thessalonica? We preached the gospel, which is the strangest thing to me. It's like you got chased out of town, beat up over here, put in prison, so you went to the next city and did the same thing. Okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But the minister of the gospel, in other words, the person that's preaching the gospel, that's us as Christians. We do not understand the word or the meaning of quit, right? The gospel needs to be preached to all the world, and regardless of how people receive or reject, regardless of how they treat us, the message still needs to go out. And that's what we're seeing in Paul's life. Now, if you are a fast flipper and you want to go to Acts chapter 16, you can do that. If not, you can hang out in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. I'll read some verses to you, and then I will have a few verses from Acts chapter 16 on the screen, but I'll have just a few of them. If you are going to flip over to Acts 16, you can do that. You can go to Acts 16:16, and that's where I'll start. The reason I'm reading this is because it tells us about what happened in Philippi. So Luke is writing the book of Acts, and he's writing about Paul and Silas and Timothy and what happened there. It says, now it happened as we went to prayer, that a certain slave girl possessed with a spirit of divination met us. What is a spirit of divination? It means that she was possessed with a demon, and that demon was evidently giving her the ability to divine or to share information. Whether that was information about the past or the present or the future. Sometimes people are caught up in this because, well, I went to see this person who read my palm or told me my fortune, and they knew all about my mom who died, 8 years ago, and they knew details that nobody else knows, and they knew this about her special jewelry or these different things. Well, how do they do that? Well, I can tell you very simply how they do that. Demons have been in existence for thousands of years, and they know very well intimate details that no one else knows, but just you and one other person. Well, my mom never told anybody, but we really liked whatever it is, parakeets or whatever. We had this special bond, and this person, they knew all about that. So they must have really they must be the real deal. No, demons have been in existence for thousands of years, and so they know all of those details, so they can bring those things up and fool people into thinking that, this person that's telling their fortune or whatever. Matter of fact, she was a fortune teller, as we read here in verse 16. But the demons can fool people. Anyhow, she was demon possessed. Okay. Now it goes on to say this. There was a certain slave girl possessed with a spirit of divination who met us, who brought her masters, more than one, masters, much profit by fortune telling. So she was making her masters rich. They were getting rich off of her being demon possessed. I mean, that's low. Like you meet someone who's demon possessed and then you just take advantage of them for your own financial gain. That's wicked. Verse 17, this girl followed Paul and us and cried out, saying, this is what she was saying, these men are the servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to us the way of salvation. Sounds like a good message, right? But that's not the kind of publicity that Paul wanted. Even though it sounds like, well, that's what they were doing, he wasn't coming in trying to make himself known. He was coming into town to make Jesus known. She's going about it the wrong way. Again, she's demon possessed. Verse 18, and this she did for many days, but Paul, greatly annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, not to the young lady, but to the spirit, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he came out that very hour. Now here's what happens in verse 19. But when her masters saw that their hope of profit was gone, because she was no longer demon-possessed, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace to the authorities, and they brought them to the magistrates, to the judges. And they said, "These men, being Jews, exceedingly trouble our city. And they teach customs which are not lawful for us, being Romans, to receive or observe." Then the multitude, and I'm going to put these verses up, the next few verses on the screen for you, so you can, if you're not in Acts chapter 16, you can look at the screen. Then the multitude rose up together against them. The multitude. Look what they did. And the magistrates tore off their clothes and commanded them to be beaten with rods. So number one, they stripped these guys. They tore their clothes off. Now that, for me right there, I would just die and melt of shame right there. It's like, just having your clothes ripped off in front of everybody. It's like, no thanks. Not only did they tear their clothes off, but they beat them with rods. Look what verse 23 says. And when they had laid many stripes on them, in other words, with rods, they beat them and left stripes, marks on their body from beating them. They threw them into prison. So they've been stripped, they've been beaten, now they're in prison, commanding the jailer to keep them securely. And then look at verse 24. And having received such a charge, the jailer, he put them into the inner prison. So not just the outer prison, took them way down into the inner prison, and fastened their feet in the, not socks, stocks. And that's not stockings, okay? It means that he locked their feet up so that they could not escape. Now, this is the Philippian jailer, and it's an excellent story. It goes on. The point that I want to make to you is that they suffered in Philippi. So that's when he says here in verse 2, but even after we had suffered before and were spitefully treated at Philippi, as you know, we were bold in our God to speak to you the gospel of God in much conflict. So when he says that we had suffered before and were spitefully treated in Philippi, that's what he's talking about. So after all of that, you got to ask yourself, those of you that are going on the Mile High mission, or those of you that might be interested in going with us to Mexico, if we were on our way to the Mile High mission, and that's in the San Bernardino Mountains, and we stopped to go to the restroom in San Bernardino and decided to preach the gospel, and then because of that, we got attacked and stripped and beaten and thrown in jail, would you then say, after you were released, all right, let's go to Mile High? Come on. We already know the answer. There's no way. Forget it. Mom, Dad, pick me up, please. No way. And yet, what did these guys do? They continued on. They said, okay, we got beat up, we were mistreated. All right, now let's go to Thessalonica and do the same thing. And then they suffered in Thessalonica also. But there are a couple of phrases here, or a phrase and a word that I want to make note of in verse 2 before we move on. As you know, there it is. He said, you Thessalonians, you know, we were bold in our God to speak to you the gospel of God. Now, that phrase, bold in our God to speak, simply means, it's real simple, the attitude of feeling quite at home with no sense of stress or strain. It means think about yourself being at home. Next week, spring break, some of you, if you're not going on the Mile High mission, you're probably going to be hanging out at home a lot. Maybe your family's got stuff going on or whatever, but you get to hang out at home. When you're hanging out at home, that's comfort, right? That's the epitome of comfort. It's like you're in your own home, in your own room or on your own couch, and you're binging on Netflix or whatever show or whatever you do, and you're just hanging out at home. Well, take that and apply that to the preaching that Paul was doing. It was an attitude of just being quiet at home with no sense of stress or strain. Now, normally we'd go with it. Okay, he was a preacher, so that's what he did. He didn't feel any stress or strain. He was just completely comfortable. Yes, however, he had just come from he had just gotten out of jail. So he gets stripped naked, or at least they took off some of his clothes, beat him, threw him in jail, locked him up. Eventually he gets out and then goes to preach the gospel again, which is what he just got attacked for. And yet this time, as he's doing it, he's just completely comfortable. No stress, no strain. Not a problem. Now, it is contrasted with this. As you know, we were bold in our God to speak to you the gospel of God in much conflict. So in one sense, he's completely at peace, completely at ease, because he's got this boldness to speak the gospel of God. However, that was mingled with conflict. The word conflict there contains a metaphor drawn from the athletic games or the arena, which Paul often used terms or metaphors from the athletic world. And it means two things. It means the place of the game or the contest, and then also the contest itself. So you're talking about a race or a struggle or a battle or a fight, wrestling match, whatever it might have been. These types of conflicts always involve intense exertion and strain, persistent effort to overcome the determined opposition. In other words, the person that you're competing against, you're going your hardest. Can also include intense concern or even anxiety on behalf of someone. So what exactly is being said there? Paul is saying, listen, in verse 2, he says, we came from Philippi where we got attacked. He says, but when we showed up in Thessalonica, we had complete peace. We were bold in our preaching of the gospel. But as we were preaching the gospel, we did it with much conflict, meaning, this is what he means. He means we were completely at ease preaching the gospel, but we were conflicted for you. We were anxious for you. We were intensely concerned for you. Because why was he intensely concerned for the Thessalonians? Why were they so concerned? Because they saw the spiritual climate that the Thessalonians were living in, because they had just experienced it in Philippi. And then they would experience it again at Thessalonica. So when they showed up to Thessalonica, they were like, hey, we got to preach with boldness here. We trust the Lord. Let's go. Let's preach. But as they preached, they were so intensely concerned for the Thessalonians. Like, man, we really want them to receive the message, the gospel, because we see what kind of spiritual climate they're living in. These people, if you don't just go along with them, you'll be physically attacked. So we need for the Thessalonians to really understand this and to receive this message of good news. Now, he continues on in verse 3, and he says, for our exhortation. Now, the word exhortation there means, technically it means a persuasive discourse. In other words, we're talking and I'm persuading you to believe in something. That's an exhortation. But in this sense, what he's talking about is their message, the gospel message that they were preaching. For our exhortation did not come from, their message was not from error. So it wasn't an erroneous message, wasn't messed up or fake or lacking anything. It wasn't from uncleanness. So there wasn't any sin mingled with it, whether in the message itself or the messengers. It was a pure message. Nor was it in deceit. They were not preaching with deceitfulness, trying to trick people. They were not like the slave girl in Philippi. They were not like her masters, who were putting her out there and saying, okay, go talk to these people, tell them their fortune, and make us some money. There wasn't any of that. Now, he goes on to say in verse 4, but... Okay, so he's just described for us, listen, our exhortation, our message was not these things. The word but indicates a change of direction. So our message wasn't this, but, verse 4, as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. As we have been approved by God. Now that's important. Paul was approved by God. Now, was he also approved by people? Yes, he was. Some people. The church of Jerusalem, the main church at the time, yeah, they approved of him. There were other people that approved of him. But the point that he's making there in verse 4 is that in going out and being a missionary and being a preacher and sharing the word of God, doing all of these things, that was all from God. He had been approved by God. So he knew it was from the Lord. Okay? He says, we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. So it was God who trusted Paul and his companions with the gospel. Okay? Even so, with that in mind, even so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God who tests our hearts. Now, you and I as missionaries, whether we're leaving on the Mile High Mission or we're going to Mexico, or whether we are leaving this room and going back out into the world as missionaries, whether it be school or your sports team or your club or the library or the store, Stater Brother, wherever you might be going, we all want to be on mission, whether we're going on a designated mission trip or whether we're just leaving our home or leaving church. It's like, okay, let's go. We're mission minded. Wherever we go, whatever it is that we do, we need to understand if we're saved, then we've been approved by God also to carry the gospel message out. If you're saved, you're approved. That's how that works. To take the message out. I love what Paul says here. Here's what missionaries do and missionary-minded people do. He says they understand that they're approved by God. They may be approved by people also, but first and foremost, they're approved by God. And if they're not approved by God, then who cares if anybody else approves of them? We want to make sure that we're approved by God. Am I saved? Am I living with and for the Lord? Then take the gospel message out. You're approved. So that's what Paul's saying there. He said, but with that in mind, we speak. So that we're not trying to please men, but pleasing God who tests our hearts. Now this is important, super important. This is, I don't know, I think this is actually, in my opinion, this is the biggest challenge with preaching the gospel. This is the biggest challenge, let me reword that. This is the biggest challenge with all of us preaching the gospel outside of this room. In here, generally speaking, I'm the one that preaches the gospel. I get up, I teach the word of God. Sometimes the gospel message is in there and I share that. But when it comes to all of us leaving this room and going out and being with our family and friends or teammates or classmates or meeting somebody at the store or in the parking lot that's asking for money or whatever, it is normally fear that keeps us from sharing that gospel message. Fear of what? Well, there's usually two things that people are afraid of, Christians are afraid of. Christians are normally afraid that the person that they're preaching the gospel to is going to ask them a Bible question that they don't know the answer to. And then you'll just look really dumb. Or you'll just seem like you don't know what you're talking about. Well, listen, that happens to me all the time. And I've been teaching the Bible for a long time, and there's still times where people will go, hey, listen, let me ask you this, what do you think about this verse? I don't know. That's all. I don't know. Now, if the situation lends itself, I can say, in other words, if I know the person, I can say, you know what, I don't know, but let me look at it. Give me a little bit of time. Let me look at it. Some of you have asked me Bible questions, especially those of you that are on the Mile High Mission. You've said, "Hey, what about this verse or this passage?" You texted me something. Okay, let me look at it. I know I teach the Bible, but I don't always just have the Bible answers right there. So if you don't know the answers, that's okay. Should you know the answer? Sure. But if you don't, that's okay. Go, you know what? I don't really know. But what do you think about Jesus? Well, what do you think about, let's go back to Genesis, and what do you think about the Nephilim? I don't know, but what do you think about Jesus? Let's talk about that. The other thing that people are normally afraid of is rejection. That the person that you're trying to preach the gospel to is going to go, you're such a dork, get out of my face. Especially if it's at school or you're among your peers, people that you would consider to be cool and lofty, you go, oh man, I can't preach the gospel to them because if I say it wrong or do it wrong or they ask me, then they're just going to think I'm a total dork. And I just can't. I can't do that. They're going to reject me, and I can't handle that. And those are normally our two biggest fears. Well, for Paul, he says, hey man, he had a cure for that. He says, we've been approved by God. Yeah, we were approved by other Christians also, but before that happened, we were approved by God. And so when we go out and we preach the gospel, he's saying we're doing it in such a way that we're not trying to please anybody. We're just trying to please God. That's all we're concerned with. And he says it's God who tests our hearts. So that's all we need to be concerned with. Which is the reason that I'm able, after all of these years, I've been teaching for a lot of years, but you know what happens when you teach a lot? Is that people have a lot of criticisms. And I get criticisms all the time. Not so much in here, but if I teach in the sanctuary, I get criticisms. I can't please everybody. And when I go anywhere to preach, I'm actually not trying to please anybody. I learned from this that, you know what? I just need to do my best to make sure that God is pleased with whatever I'm preaching and how I'm preaching. And if somebody doesn't like it, I don't know what to do. What can I do? I mean, you take any topic in your life. Is there any way to make everybody happy? There's no way. Let's talk about your fashion. Is there any way that you could wear something that everybody would just be happy with? There's no way. Let's talk about your hairstyle. Is there any hairstyle that you could have where everybody would just love it? No. Let's talk about your taste in music. Is it possible that your taste in music is music that everybody approves of? No way. How about your favorite video game? Somebody hates it. Not everybody loves it. The way that you do your makeup, the way that you wear your shoes, your favorite show. There is no topic whatsoever in your life where you could possibly please everybody. And Paul here is saying, listen, I've been approved by God. I'm not running around trying to make everybody happy. There's no way that you can do that. He says, all I'm trying to do, his main goal was, he wanted to be pleasing to the Lord. It was God that was going to test his heart. So that's all that he was concerned with. Now, when you finally get to that point, and you go, you know what? I'm just not concerned with what people think. I mean, we do need to be concerned that, we do want to be careful with that, but you understand what I'm saying. There's a balance there, but we go, you know what? When I'm preaching the gospel, I just want to make sure it's the right message, and I want to share it with love and with boldness, and I just want to make sure it's pleasing to God, and if people like it, fantastic. And if they don't, nothing I can do about that. I can pray for them, but I can't change the message to make them happy. I can't do that because it's just the one message. And I just want to get to a place in my life where I go, you know what? My main concern is just that the Lord is pleased with me. So that's what I've learned over the years, even me as a Bible teacher. It's like I'm going to be criticized. It's been going on for a good portion of my life now. What can I do? Sorry I said it the wrong way. Sorry I said that. Maybe I'll remember that next time I teach that in 10 years. But, when I got up to teach, I believe that the Lord was pleased with it. So I walk away, I lay down at night, and I go to sleep, and it's not a concern for me. As long as I make sure that I'm doing my best to explain God's word, and that's, I'm bringing that pure message. I just want to please God. Now, he says in verse 5, for neither at any time did we didn't do these things, he says. We didn't use flattering words, as you know, nor a cloak for covetousness. God is witness. Okay, so verse 5, we didn't use flattery. You know what flattery is? Flattery, here's the Chris Amaro definition. Flattery is someone telling me something about myself that I wish was true. Oh, man, your hair looks so great, man. Oh, you know what? Those pants fit you so well. Oh, man, You've been hitting the gym, haven't you? I want to believe all that stuff, but come on. Come on. I know your line, right? I was at a family gathering yesterday. It was actually a family funeral. And it was funny. There were some people like, oh, man, I haven't seen you in a long time. Oh, you look good, man. What have you been doing? Eating tacos? What? What? No, come on. Flattery. We don't do that when we preach the gospel. Oh, man, you look so fantastic. Here, let me tell you about Jesus, man. You look great. I think you'd do really well on Jesus' team. Nah, we're not doing that. Flattery is someone telling me something about myself that I wish was true. Covetousness, what is that? That's an intense desire for more. More. I got to have more. He says we never used flattering words, as you know, nor a cloak for covetousness. This just means covetousness. God is witness. He says, listen, we were never out for anything else. Now, man. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cover verses 6 through 12. But I will probably, next time we're in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, I'll probably go over these verses again very briefly. But we've got a little bit of time here, so let me go through them. Now, what we see in these, let me go ahead and put this up here for you. So the conduct of the missionaries, we've seen their conduct in preaching. The message that they preached, how they preached, what they had on their minds, who had approved of them. And as I'm saying that, I'm remembering that as it pertains to the preaching, I know, and I've shared this with some of you, I know that God called me here, according to Matthew chapter 4. I was at a men's retreat, and I was praying about whether I should come here or not, and the pastor said, let's open up to Matthew chapter 4, and he came to this verse, and God used that to speak to my heart, to say, let's go, kid, get over to revival. So I know that I'm approved by God to be here. I don't know if you like that or not. If you don't, sorry. But God approved me being here. I know that he called me here. But the conduct of the missionaries in their preaching, their message, they were approved, and, how they did it and what their main goal was and all of those things. But also we're going to see their conduct in their practice, not just their preaching, but their practice. How did they live? Now, these verses 6 through 12, are incredibly precious to me. Yes, I used the word precious. And the first time I really studied these was, hold on to your britches, man, 1996. Yes, I said 19. There used to be a year, 1996. And in 1996 was the first time that I studied through these verses, and they just came alive. I also at that time realized my great lack in these areas. Now, what has happened is that from verses 7 to 12, for me personally, these are my model verses as a leader of my family and as a leader in ministry all of these years. This is what I'm striving for, and I'm still striving. I haven't reached yet. I do not do all of these things very well. Some of them I might do okay. Some of them I do not do very well. And so every time I come to this, I'm like, Lord, God, I've been studying this since 1996. God, can't you, make me good in all these areas? And anyways, that's a different story. But let's start reading in verse 6. So Paul is talking about how they preached and what they didn't say and how they spoke. They didn't use flattery and they didn't use covetousness, nor did we seek glory from men. So we weren't trying to find glory from people, either from you. Now, just real quickly, nor did we seek glory from men. Real quickly, think back. Remember the slave girl? And she was bringing all that attention to them as they were coming in town to preach. Paul says, we're not here to be glorified. So then he speaks to the demon as like, get out of her, leave us alone. Paul says, we did not seek glory from men, either from you, the Thessalonians, or from others. We weren't trying to get glory from anybody. When we might have made demands as apostles of Christ. So Paul says, listen, we were officially apostles. We could have made demands like, hey, you need to pay us this much, and we need to make sure that we got enough food, and you guys need to take care of us. He didn't do that. He'll go on to explain what he did here in just a moment. But you need to understand that he was not in it. He wasn't going out and preaching the gospel in order to get anything. He was going to preach the gospel in obedience to God and to please God. That was it. You'll find out in a moment he was not concerned with money because he was making tents at night. Well, at least we believe it was at night. He was making tents, probably day and night, and then selling those in order to fund his missionary trips. But there was never any concern for we're going to get rich off of this thing. When I was praying about, and I'm using myself as an example just because I learned from this. That's all I'm saying. I'm not telling you these things so you can go, oh, our Chris is an awesome Chris, he reigns. Well, I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you so because I want you to understand that years ago, I've been reading these for years, and then over the years, little by little, putting these things into practice. And so when Pastor John 8 years ago called me up and said, hey, I want to talk to you, and we got together and we talked. He bought me dinner, by the way, a steak. But anyways, we went to dinner, and he said, I want you to pray about coming down to revival. I need a youth pastor. Our youth pastor left. I said, okay. Say less. Let me pray. I got to pray. I never, during that time as I was praying, in fact, I never asked, well, how much does it pay? Or what are the bennies like? What are the benefits like? How often will I get a raise? What's the vacation like? Didn't matter. All I was concerned with, once he asked me, was, God, what do you want? That's all I was concerned with. I didn't care how much it paid. It didn't matter to me. If God wanted me there, say less. Let's go. If God didn't want me there, that's okay. Let's just stay where I'm at. Whatever God wanted, that's all I wanted. So I never asked John, well, how much does it pay? What are the benefits like? When can I retire? What's vacation like? Do I get this? Do I get that? Do I get the perks? Didn't matter. And it still doesn't matter. Still doesn't matter. I don't have any desire to go anywhere else but right here on a Wednesday night and on a Sunday. This is it. I have no dreams of eventually moving into the sanctuary and being the pastor. Some people have no desire to do something. Listen to me, I have a desire not to do that. You understand? There's a difference there. Some people have no desire. I got no desire to do that. No, I have a desire not to do that. This is the only place I want to be. And I'm just going to be here as long as the Lord wants me here. This is it. This is good. So Paul is saying, listen, we might have made demands as apostles of Christ, but we never did. He says in verse 7, but there's another change of direction. He says, we didn't seek these things. We weren't making demands. We didn't do any of these things. So what did you do, Paul? Paul says in verse 7, but we were gentle among you. Now, there are several things in these verses that I did not put on the screen because there are too many. If you want to write them down, you can write them down. Totally up to you. The first thing that Paul says about himself and the guys that were with him, his team, is that they were gentle. But we were gentle among you. He didn't come in rough, making demands. You better do this. I'm an apostle. I'm a leader. I've been approved by God. Let's go, bow down. He didn't do that. He came in gently. And then what he does is this. This is wild. Paul describes himself as a nursing mother. Now we could go, you know what, that's so awkward, that's so weird. Okay, whatever. I don't know how many of you, some of you have younger brothers, younger sisters, and you may remember your mom nursing those younger siblings. I obviously am married. My wife birthed our 4 kids, so I saw her breastfeeding the kids. The picture, it's not weird, it's not nothing, it's just natural. That's what moms do. They're giving of themselves. We'll talk some more about that. But when he thinks about gentleness and the way that he was with the Thessalonians, and remember, they could have said, oh no, you weren't. Remember, they were there. He's reminding them, we were gentle among you. You go, well, how gentle? What kind of gentle are you talking about? Just as a nursing mother cherishes her own children. You go, what does that mean? When it says cherishes her own children, what it means is that the mom who's nursing the baby warms the baby with her own body heat. How does she do that? By pulling the baby in close, tight to her body. When it says cherishes her own children, it means that she warms those children with her own body heat. I'm going to keep you warm, safe. That's how close they were, right? I mean, if you've seen someone, a baby being breastfed, you know that. The baby has to be close for obvious reasons. But the mom's not like, oh, this is, so gross or whatever. And the mom is pulling him in tight. That's the picture that Paul uses. Paul pictures himself like a mom providing for her children. He says, that's how we were with you. Now, that's number one. And let me tell you, since 1996, I've been blowing it right there, number one. I am so not gentle. You can ask my kids when you see them. My kids are in their 20s now, but when you see them, you can ask them, was he gentle? Thanks for playing. Blew it right there. And there's been plenty of times in ministry where I wasn't gentle. So again, when I come to this list, I go, oh, Lord, please forgive me. Please help. Gentleness. A missionary, a person who's sharing the gospel, a person who's seeking to minister to someone else has got to be gentle. Verse 8. How about this one? Affectionate longing. It means yearning. And we hear these words, we hear affectionate longing. We hear the word longing, and because of our corrupt society, we immediately think, something romantic or sexual or impure. Oh, I'm longing for you. That's not what it means. Here, he's using it in the sense that he was yearning for them in a spiritual sense. He wanted them to understand, to receive everything and understand everything. Affectionate longing. He says, so affectionately longing for you. Again, that's a mom. Affectionately yearning for her kids, right? He says, so affectionately longing for you, we were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives, because you had become dear to us. Now, I believe that Paul is still picturing himself like a nursing mother here, nursing her children. That's Paul. He says, we were yearning for you. But also, this is crazy, verse 8. This is crazy. I know it doesn't sound crazy to you right now, but let me point out what he's saying here. We were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives. Why? Because you had become dear to us. Wait a minute. Paul was only there for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. They obviously had a special bond. They formed a bond very, very quickly, very deeply. But when he says this, we were well pleased to impart to you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives. Here's what he's saying. Now listen closely. Don't freak out. Let me explain. Paul is saying it wasn't enough to preach the gospel. That was not enough. Preaching the gospel was the start. And that's obviously the key to salvation. But Paul wasn't only concerned with their salvation. That was the first goal. But then once they were saved, it became all about wanting those Thessalonians to grow in the Lord. And the only way that was going to happen was not just through the preaching of the gospel. Jesus came to this earth, he was sinless, and died on a cross, and those things. That was not enough. That was the start. That was their salvation. After that, it became about them living with and for Christ, them growing spiritually. And in order for that to happen, Paul says, not only did we impart the gospel to you, not only did we invest. When he says impart, he means that we invested in you the gospel. We put that in you. He says, but that wasn't all that we put in you. He says, we imparted to you also our own lives. Why? Because you had become dear to us. They had become dear to Paul. So not only did he preach the gospel, but he also imparted his own life. He says, man, we gave you our own lives. In other words, they stayed there for as long as they could. And it was 2-3 weeks, whatever it might have made, maybe a month, but it wasn't much longer than that. It doesn't seem like. But what he's saying is, we were there with you, living with you, suffering with you, experiencing life with you. Though it was a short time, he says it wasn't just enough to preach the gospel of God. We gave you our own lives, and because we did that because you had become dear to us. Now that is a special relationship. And imagine that. Imagine having a leader like this who's willing to give you not just the word of God or the message, but also to give you their own lives. What do you need? How can I minister to you? You need time. You need, what is it that you need? Imagine having a leader like that. That was Paul. And so now you can see why I, since 1996, have been reading through this and going, oh man, I fall short. Lord, help. 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 This is Paul. Now, we're out of time, so let me just read the rest of these verses. I'm going to go read verses 9 to 12, and then we'll come back and look at them again next time. He says, for you remember, brethren. And I'll explain all this next time. We'll get the worship team up here in just a moment. For you remember, brethren, our labor and toil, for laboring night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you. We preach to you the gospel of God. You are witnesses, and God also, how devoutly and justly and blamelessly we behaved ourselves among you who believe. As you know, how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you as a father does his own children. So he saw himself as a mom and a dad. Verse 12, let's stop here, that you would walk worthy. Here was the goal, that you would walk worthy of God, who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. So whatever it was going to take for those people to have a walk worthy of God, Paul was there for it. Boy, I've got some work to do. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for tonight.